Welcome everyone, my name is Tina Claflin and I'll be presenting on organizing your family history. I'm a retired U.S. Coast Guard veteran, a small business owner, and grad school student with Simmons University in Library and Information Science, and I currently live in Winchester, Virginia. I'm the owner of Halcyon Reflections, a certified photo manager, and I offer independent consulting and organizing services for veterans, families, and nonprofits to help others get organized to preserve their stories. Let's just start with a brief agenda and overview of what content we will be going over for this presentation. We will touch on topics to get started and outline an organizational process that can be used to structure your genealogical research. We will go over an actual physical filing system for your papers and documents, which will then match and be able to extend into your digital file system for you to use on your computer. I'll briefly talk about considerations of cloud and web services and some considerations on how to choose a service that is right for you. We got a lot to cover, but I want you to keep in mind that we are establishing a framework that is completely adjustable and can be developed to suit your individual needs and your style. As we go forward, think about your current system. Do you have an organizational system in place now? Is it working for you, or are you overwhelmed and don't know where to start? One of the most important things to think about is what is your overall vision for your research? Do you hope to pass it down to your family and future generations? Are you interested in creating a book or a manuscript? Or would you like to just be able to share and collaborate with your family? Or do you simply just enjoy doing family history and it's your hobby? Whatever your end vision is, you will find that the more organized you are, the more time you can spend doing the research and seeing your end goals come to life. Think about what some of your current challenges are when you work on your family history outside of the actual research. If you are like me, you go down a lot of rabbit holes and get sidetracked on where to focus your research and where you might have left off. My own family research only happens occasionally when I have some free time. This is where you can really maximize your time if you start off with an organized system. That way you don't spend all your time trying to figure out where you left off or trying to remember where things are when you need to go back to them. So looking at the two pictures, would you consider yourself a filer or a piler at this point of your research? They are both systems, regardless of if someone else can follow it or not, but if you were looking for a specific piece of paper, such as a birth record, which stack is going to be easier to find that specific piece of paper in? Do you consider yourself more of a piler at this point? Or maybe you are a little bit of both. I think many of us have our own system that works for us, but as you are consolidating your family history, think about how or if you might hand it down to someone else. If you inherited the collection on the right, would you feel a little overwhelmed with where to begin? Think about how your family might feel if you handed down all your years of family research in a pile like the one on the left. Keeping an organized system is more likely to inspire someone to also take part in your research. I hope to be able to show you how all of your research can be neatly organized and packaged for your end goal in something like what is shown here. Maybe it's a gift for your family that's in a media device, such as a thumb drive or a hard drive. Maybe it's your final finished manuscript or family album. Or it could be a nicely packaged and preserved family archive like the photos shown here. So how do we get to this end goal or vision? Well, first we need to consider our organizing process. There are many different ways to organize things. These might include numerical order or chronological, alphabetical order or color coding, or maybe it's a mixture of all these methods or something else that you may have created. So what do we actually need first to get started? To help you determine your structure and establish your organizing system, we are going to start with a pedigree chart. Have you already created a pedigree chart? If you haven't yet created one, you can usually find blank copies by searching the internet, or you can use the one I've provided for this presentation. Basically, it's a chart that helps you identify the members in your family, starting with your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and so on from both your mother's and your father's side. It's a good place to start if you are just getting started in your family history research. For this session, and for creating your initial organizational structure, we're going to focus on the 4-generation chart. We want to keep it simple to start, but as you go further out with the generations, the principles are the same and you can expand on your organizing framework. Here's a 4-generation pedigree chart. So what we will be doing is filling this in and then taking a look at a few organizing methods that can carry over to your physical and digital filing system. Once we fill it in, we assign numbers to each of the individuals listed. These numbers will be used if we want to create a numerical system for our files. You can use the numbers that are shown in the example, such as starting with you as number 1. It's useful to use this type of numbering system because you expand your generations, you just keep adding on numbers to identify those individuals. Additionally, when we fill it in, we will be using basic information such as our family members' names and birth dates. These can then be used for chronological or an alphabetical filing system as well. Or we may find that we use a mixture of these as we start to organize our work. So because we want to use this information in those ways, we want to make sure that we are filling the information in with a consistent naming convention. Such as with birth dates, we will use the 4-digit year, 2-digit month, and 2-digit day if you know them. And with names, we want to use last name first, followed by first name and middle name. It's customary to capitalize the last name just to make it stick out and be more identifiable as you are browsing through your documents. And for maiden names, you can usually place those in parentheses after the married last name. So now in one pedigree chart, we have 3 of our methods of organizing available: numerical and alphabetical by name, and chronological by birth year. Now as an added bonus, we will bring in our color coding system. This chart that I have provided also brings in the color coding system that many genealogists utilize. So if we divide our chart up, we have our paternal side of our family on the top, or our father's side, which we will identify with blue. We then have our maternal side of our family on the bottom, or our mother's side, which we'll use red for. We bring in green and yellow as the line moves further down, expanding into our grandmother's parents on both sides. One thing to mention is that your chosen system with your numbers, your surnames, and your color codes is not going to be the same for the next generation as you hand this down. Each person starts off with their own chart, with them being the first in the line. That is why it's useful to keep your chart with your research so that someone might add on to it later down your generational lines as they fill out their own chart. So now if you think about your pedigree chart being the container or box and the individuals as the file folders, you can start to see how this will come together in a physical filing system. So now we are ready to bring in our research files. At this point, you should be thinking about what method you want to use. I'll be using an example that is a little bit of a mixture of these methods so that you can see that your system doesn't have to be overly restricted in any one method. The key is just to keep things consistent. There are some helpful supplies that you can use to help you get set up. You don't have to use color-coded files or binders, but you might want to use some highlighters to help with identifying your color-coding system. Post-it notes make great temporary labels or can be used for making notes on your files, as well as index cards or notepads. You can also use stickers or labels to set up your files, and you can be creative to keep this part fun and inspiring. This is where you're really going to dig in. Your first step is to gather all of the things that you currently have with your family research. You might find that designating a work area or spare room is helpful to lay everything out and start to sort through it. Start by making some boxes or files with your labels, which can be temporary for the time being, and this is where you will conduct more of a bulk sorting process. So what that means is you aren't going to be overly detailed in this first sorting process. You really just want to get through the items that are easiest to file and sort and save the more detailed sorting for the next round. For example, this photo shows 4 file boxes with color-coded folders. Each color corresponds to a surname. Within that folder, there will be individual folders with individual names. So you're going to go through your items, pick them up, and just briefly skim over it to determine a name and where it belongs. If you come across items that you aren't sure exactly where they belong, maybe it's research notes or random information, set those items aside for now so that you can get through this bulk sorting process. You can see I have other boxes in front of each of the file boxes, so those are for the items that I may need to go back through or don't feel like they really fit into any individual's folder. This is where people often get stuck and things get complicated. But try to get through this part quickly and efficiently and put aside anything that you aren't sure about for now. After I've done my bulk sort, I can then go back through those things and perhaps create some additional categories or files elsewhere. If you have a lot of stuff, you might just want to work in surnames first and then go back to that pile and resort down to the individual level. Take notes as you go and even put some sticky notes on things to remember later. But at this point, you don't want to be overly detailed and you don't want to be too immersed into the content. This is a closer look at what your files might look like after you are done. So you can see I use one folder with a tab labeled by surname, and behind that I use individual file folders for the individuals. This is where you might use your chronological system by birth dates. As you can see, I have several family members listed by their birth dates. In this case, they are my aunts and uncles, and they fall in line between my father and my grandfather. And I've offset them by using a different file folder with an offset tab, so that I can keep them kind of separate and easily identifiable. As far as the labeling goes, again, you want to be consistent with what is on your pedigree chart and your naming methods. Decide where and if you want files for children, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc., and how those will be treated. You might be able to easily identify your immediate family members, but as your generations go further down the line, it gets more confusing if you don't always know and associate those names. Keeping things consistent will help with this. And generally, children will stay with a family group until marriage or adulthood, in which time they will get their own file or folder. If you need to, create a key code that you can reference or so that others can reference your system. This can be done right on your pedigree chart. Using your chosen framework will allow you to expand your system as you need to. And make sure to keep your pedigree chart at the front of your files for easy reference. So as we review our physical filing, there are a few best practices or tips to keep in mind as you go. We want to keep the end goal in mind during the process and as we are choosing our organizational system. So if it's a book or a manuscript, perhaps you want to think about your system as chapters in a book. Regardless of where you are in your journey, it might be helpful to go back and designate a workspace to bring all of your research together. You can use file boxes, a closet, spare bedroom, or even a portable table to lay things out. If you have other items such as memorabilia or photos, it's helpful to separate those out to begin this initial process. Think about some supplies that might be helpful to you, such as folders or notepads or spare bins or boxes. Determine what is currently working for you and what is not working for you at this point in your research. And keep notes along the way, starting with your pedigree chart, and continually reference it. If you're like most of us, you probably have a lot of research lost in your computer, or you may only have digital files. I think in some ways having physical files was a little easier to handle because you can see and touch them. But I'm going to show you that you can use these same methods and correlate them directly into your computer files. So are you a filer or a piler? Does your desktop screen look more like the one on the left, or is it a dumping ground for your files like the one on the right? It doesn't matter what type of computer you use, whether it's a Mac or a Windows system, they have the same general structure in handling files. You can think of it like a filing cabinet where you have a folder, subfolders, and documents within those folders. We will start with a main folder hub, and you can label family history or whatever you choose. Going from there, you will want to create folders inside of your main hub. Again, referencing your chosen method or your pedigree chart, you can create your main folder structure. In this example, I'm using surnames, but also numbered so that they fall in a numerical order in which I want them to. Additionally, you can see on mine that I have a folder with a hashtag family photos. I'll touch on that here on the next few slides. Now, taking one of my surname folders, for example, Claflin, I then create individual folders for each of my relatives on the Claflin side. Instead of creating too many nested folders, I just keep them in line in a chronological order by birth dates. So you will see I use a B for birth year and just the year so as to keep the file names not overly long. You can also see that this pretty much parallels my structure in my physical filing system. And now for the individual files, again keeping your names consistent, and in this case I label the documents by the year, so again they fall in a chronological order. For those family members that served in the military, I create a separate folder with the years of service and use my own numbering system for their service records. There is a whole nother organizing course of instruction for this, but I just want to show you what that might look like for those who have military service records as part of their research and family history. And this is what your files might look like on your computer once it's all set up. I would encourage you to set up your structure just as you did with your physical files, and then complete the sorting process, bringing in your files throughout your computer or other media devices into your newly established system. The benefit of technology and computers is that there are many enhancements you can do with your file system, such as searching and using tags for identifying your records. So let's go back to the photos. Even though I organize these separately from my family history files and research, they still belong with my family history. This is also an entire lesson on its own, and I don't want to get too far off track, but I think it's worth mentioning because you will come across this and wonder how to work with those. You might ask yourself if you should separate your photos by family groups or individuals, and you may have digital photos as well as old photos or photos that you have recently scanned. Rarely does a photo only contain one member of the family. Often there are multiple family members as well as friends and sometimes even members of both sides of your family. This is why I treat these separately and use technology to create and enhance the information that lives with the photos, or what is embedded in what is called metadata, or information. So for the purposes of this instruction, I would recommend that you deal with those outside of your family history file organization at this time. Then at the point where you are starting to assemble your history and writing about individuals, you can bring in select photos to enhance that story. You can see here that I organize my photos chronologically, but I will use other technology to put names, stories, and other information inside of those photos. You can use your computer information system to do this, or more sophisticated technology such as Lightroom or even cloud services. One thing to be aware of is that whatever information you put into your photos, you want to make sure that that information stays with your photos when you download or move them around. An example is when you upload a photo into something such as a social media site or even an email service. That service may compress your image or strip out the valuable information inside the photos, such as date taken or any captions you have added. This isn't really a problem as long as you know this, but you want to ensure that your master files remain intact to how you enhance them and you don't rely on those services to be your master copies. So briefly recap our digital file system. Again, we want to use naming methods that are consistent with your pedigree chart, just as we did with our physical files. Decide where and if you want files for children, aunts, uncles, cousins, or anyone else. For now, treat your photos separately, but they can live in your Family History Hub for use and reference. Expand your system as you need to and as you gather more research. And again, keep your pedigree chart at the front for easy reference. With any computer or digital media system, there's potential for failure. What you don't want to happen is for a hard drive failure or computer failure and you lose all of your work. This is where a purposeful backup method is imperative. You can think of it as a 3-2-1 backup method. That means 3 total backups on 2 different types of media. One may be your main computer and one an external hard drive, and then one stored off-site, either in a fireproof safe or a completely different location, such as a cloud service. So here's what that looks like. You have your primary data on your hub, for this case, your Family History Hub. This is number 1. A backup on a different type of media, such as another external hard drive. This is number 2. And then for your third, you store it off-site or on your chosen cloud service. One thing to keep in mind is that syncing services that are common, such as iCloud or Google Cloud, are not the same as a backup. A true backup will create a secondary copy in time, and you can recover files if you accidentally delete them. A syncing service means if you delete something in one place, it syncs your data to also delete it in the other place. This is why you want to make sure you have backup copies so that you can recover files if you need to. And that brings us into our cloud and web services. What is a cloud storage exactly? Cloud storage is just a service where data, such as your data, is stored and maintained, managed, backed up, or synced remotely and accessible over the internet. And here are some common cloud and web services that you are all probably familiar with or have at least used a few. Additionally, here are some web services specifically dedicated to your genealogy research, just to name a few. Anytime you're putting information into one of the cloud or web services, it's important to know how that information is being used and accessed, not only by you, but potentially others. A few things to consider and investigate before you choose these services. Do I want control over how my files are organized and accessed? Do I want private and safe storage? What if I pass on? Are my files deleted, or will they be deleted if I stop making payments? Is there a legacy clause? Do I want the ability to share easily with family or friends? And do I want to rent or own my storage? What rights am I giving up to the content if I upload to their platform? And rights can be in privacy, ownership, copyright, or personal information to be used for advertising or data mining. The bottom line is many of us use these services we sign up for and barely skim the terms of service before we hit agree. But do you really know what you are agreeing to? You should consider your privacy and ownership rights to your content at the very least. Determine your pros and cons and make your choices based upon what's more important to you. It's always a good idea to start to think about your digital legacy and how someone might close or access the content from your online sites, or even your computer should they need to. Keeping passwords and your valuable research accessible, should you pass on, can greatly increase the chances that all of your work won't disappear, and it may inspire future generations to continue your family legacy. You don't want to keep all your eggs in one basket. That's why creating a backup system is imperative. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation and you're ready to get your family history organized so that it can start working for you in your goal or vision to create a family legacy. Please feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions about this presentation or need additional guidance. Thank you.